The Death Railway is what people around the world call the Siam-Burma Railway. It was constructed by Japan during the Great East Asian War, which is one of the darkest chapters in human history. The railway holds many astonishing tales of hardship and survival. When former prisoners of war returned home and shared their experiences, few believed them until the truth emerged later on. The Siamese initially believed that if Japan built the railway, it would remain under Japanese control forever. So, they decided to undertake the project itself. However, when the Thai Railway Department was consulted, they stated that even on a plain terrain, constructing a railway spanning 430 kilometers would require up to 8 years. Building it within a year seemed impossible. Japan, drawing inspiration from the construction of the Egyptian pyramids, accomplished the task using relentless labor, completing it in just 10 months and 10 days, despite the challenging terrain of rugged ravines. When David Lean, a British filmmaker, decided to bring the harrowing tale of the Death Railway to life, he created a cinematic masterpiece known as The Bridge on the River Kwai. This film featured 4 renowned Thai actresses in supporting roles, portraying the courageous porters who worked on the railway. Interestingly, despite being set in Thailand, the movie was filmed in Sri Lanka, ultimately becoming one of Hollywood's most celebrated films. The Bridge on the River Kwai garnered numerous prestigious awards and proved to be a box office hit worldwide. Its compelling storytelling and powerful portrayal of human resilience captured the hearts of audiences everywhere, sparking a global interest in visiting the real locations depicted in the film, particularly in Thailand. The movie's success inspired countless people to journey to Thailand, eager to witness firsthand the sights and stories that had captured their imaginations on the silver screen. A famous train route was built for important reasons, aiming to finish in just 1 year. But the land it had to cross was tough, a wild place full of deep valleys. There were lots of diseases like malaria, dysentery, and cholera, and not enough medicine or food. The shelters couldn't keep out the rain and cold. Big tools were hard to bring and use, so people had to do all the work. Because of the rush to finish the job for the war, sick people couldn't take breaks. Sometimes, those who were very sick couldn't even stand up. They were left to die in huts or buried alive to stop diseases from spreading. Sadly, in the quest for victory, human lives weren't valued much. Some say, for every railway piece laid, a life was lost. The Japanese army has always seen railways as very important. They formed railway battalions back in 1896 during the war with Korea and Manchuria. Later, after the 1907 war with Russia, these battalions expanded into a railway brigade. In October 1941, Japan sent soldiers to French Indochina and brought along a railway brigade of 6,000 men. They also carried 7,000 tons of tracks, locomotives, containers, and all the equipment needed to build railways. It was during this journey that Lieutenant Colonel Torio Hiroik, chief of the railway staff, got the idea to build a railway between Thailand and Burma. However, the army didn't agree with him at first. Things changed in June 1941 when the Japanese defeated the American forces at Midway Base. Before this victory, the Americans controlled a lot of the sea and airspace. This made it hard for Japan to transport goods between Singapore, which Japan had taken and renamed Shonan, and Burma. So, they decided to support the idea of building the Thai-Burma railway line. This decision coincided with General Hideki Tojo becoming Prime Minister. On March 23, 1942, Japan asked Thailand to help build a railway stretching from Banpong to the Three Pagodas Pass and continuing into Burma, connecting with the Burmese Railway at Thanbasayat Station near Malamian City. The plan was to cover a distance of 430 kilometers, and Japan aimed to complete it within a year. They requested Thailand's assistance in providing 60 kilometers of track and recruiting 3,000 laborers for the remainder of the project. Japan planned to use prisoners of war alongside Japanese engineers for the construction work. Field Marshal P. Pibulsangkram agreed with the idea but insisted on overseeing the construction himself, preferring Japan to only provide the necessary materials. The matter was then reported to the Thai Railway Department. On April 3rd, the Railway Department responded with concerns about the timeframe and feasibility of the project. They expressed worry that constructing a railway spanning over 400 kilometers would be incredibly challenging. Even on flat terrain, it was estimated to take up to 8 years to complete. However, upon examining the terrain, they found no level ground suitable for construction. Adding to the difficulty was the shortage of construction equipment, as Japan had acquired most of it for military purposes, leaving Bangkok markets depleted. The railway department highlighted the logistical challenges of transporting equipment, especially since Japan heavily relied on trains for military transport. Tools essential for forest clearing, such as hoes, spades, axes, and saws, were scarce due to Japan's procurement. Even the task of railway repair alone was proving to be daunting. Given these circumstances, the railway department expressed doubt about completing the project within the proposed 1-year timeframe, considering the magnitude of the challenges at hand. Field Marshal P. was deeply concerned about Japan's intentions regarding the railway. He feared that once completed, Japan would claim ownership of the track indefinitely. In an effort to safeguard Thailand's interests, he proposed buying the railway once the war ended. However, Japan deferred any discussions about post-war arrangements, urging Field Marshal P. to wait until then. Seeking clarity, Field Marshal P. inquired whether the railway would serve military or commercial purposes. Japan responded that during the war, its primary function would be military, transitioning to commercial after the war's end. Field Marshal P. recognized this as a tactic to ensure Japanese control over the railway post-war, prompting him to assert that according to Thai law, any commercial railway required a concession and payment of land expropriation fees. Field Marshal P. proposed a compromise. Thailand would construct a road from Nong Pla Duck Station to the Makam, spanning 70 kilometers, while Japan would build a bridge across the River Kwai and clear a path through the forest leading to the Three Pagodas Pass in Burma. Recognizing the potential conflicts with local communities if Japanese soldiers intervened directly, Japan agreed to let Thailand handle the land filling, with Japan responsible for laying the tracks. On July 5, 1942, construction of the railway in Thailand officially commenced, with Nong Pla Duck Station marked as 0 kilometer. Meanwhile, in Burma, Japan began work on the railway from Thanbasayat Station. On June 28, 1942, bypassing lengthy negotiations and potential disputes. After the war, many survivors of the railway construction, who were once prisoners of war, shared their experiences through books. These books became bestsellers, shedding light on the horrors of the Thai-Burma railway construction. The cruelty endured during this time shocked the world. Many couldn't fathom that humans could treat each other so brutally. Those who returned home recounted their stories, but few believed them. It was unimaginable that such atrocities could occur, with actions so inhumane inflicted upon fellow humans. The harsh reality of the railway's construction became widely known, leaving a lasting impact on those who learned of it. Japan employed deceptive tactics to manipulate prisoners of war held in various concentration camps, including those in dire conditions like Singapore. They spread rumors about a new prisoner of war camp being built in Thailand, promising better living conditions and more complete food supplies. Despite their skepticism toward Japan, the prisoners of war dared to hope for improved conditions, clinging to the belief that even a slight improvement from the harsh realities of Singapore would be welcomed. In Singapore, where they received only 2 inadequate meals a day and endured insults and bullying, any glimmer of hope seemed promising. Some even dared to dream that the new camp in Thailand might be under the care of the International Red Cross, offering a sense of relief and protection. This hope drove many prisoners of war to willingly accept the prospect of being transferred to Thailand, despite their lingering doubts about Japan's intentions. A British Army clergyman named Douglas shared a story about how the Japanese tricked prisoners of war from Singapore. They were told they were going to a nice place like a sanatorium where they could play the piano and listen to music on vinyl records provided by the Japanese. The prisoners were happy and believed it would be better than the tough conditions in Singapore. The Japanese said this journey would help their weak bodies and break the monotony of life behind barbed wire fences. They claimed it would ward off disease and make them better. Trusting these promises, the prisoners eagerly followed. However, the journey turned out to be very different. Packed into steel freight cars, 35 people endured a difficult 5-day trip under the hot sun. The food given was just rice and a kind of soup. When they reached Benpong, instead of getting rest, they were told to walk. Confused, one of them asked why they weren't resting as promised. The Japanese soldier laughed in a way that only prisoners of war could understand. It became clear they had been betrayed once again by the Japanese soldier. According to the Treaty on the Treatment of Prisoners of War signed by Japan in Geneva on July 27, 1929, healthy prisoners of war, including military officers, could be assigned to work. However, this work was not supposed to be related to war or be unhygienic and dangerous. Unfortunately, Japan did not seem to care much about international treaties. When prisoners of war protested, Japan's response was dismissive, claiming that they could do as they pleased because they believed they would win the war. Colonel Phillips Toucey of the British Army, who inspired the character Colonel Nicholson in the movie Bridge over the River Kwai, was forced to work on building a bridge across the River Kwai. He recalled the challenging tasks assigned to them. From the day we arrived, we were immediately put to work carrying large logs. It was the toughest work I had ever done. Japanese soldiers pushed us to work until evening, leaving us so exhausted that we often fell asleep without eating dinner. The next day, we were tasked with moving dirt using baskets. It was backbreaking and repetitive work from 8:30 in the morning until 7:30 in the evening, with just an hour break for lunch. Due to the railway's strict completion deadline, Japan organized each day's work and required prisoners to finish it within the allotted time. If the work wasn't completed, captives had to continue until it was done. This sometimes meant working late into the night or even through to the next morning to catch up with the next day's tasks. Every prisoner of war, regardless of their rank or profession, was required to work equally as laborers. Whether they were military officers, engineers, architects, or chaplains, everyone had to labor the same. Unfortunately, there were no modern tools available to ease the workload, except for some pulleys. Vokes, another former prisoner of war, shared his experiences of working conditions we were tasked with building two bridges about a mile away from the camp. Every morning after breakfast, we lined up and walked to the worksite carrying our lunch with us. We worked until 6 p.m. every day. Our duties involved transporting spikes, sticks, and ropes to the bridge construction site. One bridge spanned 40 yards, while the other was slightly shorter. These bridges crossed deep ravines, too deep to fill with dirt. It wasn't work suited for someone with engineering knowledge. We had to labor as ordinary workers. The Japanese construction method was simple but only served a temporary purpose. To set up the poles, we used mallets to drive the spikes into the ground. Then, two groups of people pulled multiple ropes to swing the pendulum and drive the large spikes deep into the soil. Once the spikes were secure and level, we constructed wooden bridges on these foundations. Some prisoners sat and sharpened the spikes, while others pulled ropes and pulleys to bring fresh wood from the river, which was about 30 feet below. The conditions became unbearable as the scorching afternoon sun burned our skin. Without proper clothing, we fashioned loincloths from bits of cloth to cover ourselves, barely offering any protection. Sweat poured from our bodies, stinging our eyes as we toiled under the relentless heat, pulling heavy sticks into place like the slaves of ancient Egypt constructing the pyramids. The scaffolding towered above us while Japanese officers signaled the release of the pendulum onto the spikes, and we repeated the grueling process. In just one day, we hauled 88 large logs from the river using only our hands and sheer human strength. Then, we carried them another 60 yards and stacked them, repeating the process until we were exhausted or fell ill. Sick prisoners were denied food. Sustenance was reserved only for those deemed fit to work. Those too ill to toil were left in huts without medicine. Cholera-stricken individuals often perished while sitting on the toilet, their bodies weakened by constant defecation. Others succumbed while leaning against trees, their remains consumed by hedgehogs and rats within 48 hours, leaving only white bones behind in their original seated position. In the forest, some people crawled to their deaths, while others, on the brink of dying, were buried by their fellow captives. One soldier faced severe beatings for refusing to kill a Tamil coolie who was dying of cholera. Another incident involved an elderly Tamil man who, as he was being carried to his burial site alongside a corpse, suddenly stood up. A Japanese soldier struck his head with a shovel, causing him to fall into the grave, where he was covered with dirt along with the corpse. To bolster their workforce, Japan forcibly removed Chinese, Tamil, and Indian people from Singapore, Malaya, Indonesia, and Vietnam. Yet, this still wasn't sufficient. They asked Thailand to provide an additional 13,000 laborers, offering a wage of 2 baht per day plus a travel allowance of 1 baht. Additionally, Japan sought 2,000 skilled workers, but Thailand couldn't fulfill this request. Instead, Japan urged Thailand to compel the Chinese Commercial Association to send Chinese laborers. Thailand, claiming no authority over the association, initially refused. However, after negotiations, the association agreed to provide laborers at a rate of 3 baht per day. In the event of death, they requested 200 baht for funeral expenses and permission to sell liquor and opium, as smoking opium was believed to prevent malaria among the Chinese workers. Even after fulfilling Japan's demands for laborers, the supply still fell short, prompting both the Chinese Commercial Association and Thai authorities to resort to deception to meet the quotas. Finding volunteers was challenging. The association recruited Chinese individuals from Yala province, intending for them to work in Chumphan but redirected them to Benpong instead. This led to dissatisfaction among the workers, nearly resulting in an altercation that required intervention from a mixed Japanese-Thai inspector and the governor of Kanchanaburi province to defuse the situation. Meanwhile, Thai laborers from Ratchaburi were coerced into compliance under threat of arrest and relocation to Field Marshal P.'s settlement, a prospect dreaded by many. However, the settlement, though self-made by Field Marshal P., was a far better option than toiling as coolies on the death railway. Recognizing that these laborers had been deceived, the Japanese requested that only volunteers be sent forth. As early as October 1943, Japan intensified the construction of the railway, working around the clock to meet the deadline for launching an attack on India. This increased pressure significantly on the Japanese and Korean soldiers overseeing the work, exacerbating the stress on both prisoners of war and laborers. The already dire situation escalated further until, on October 25, the Thai-Burmese railway was connected at Khoi Ta Station in Thai territory near the Burmese border. Remarkably, the official opening ceremony took place just 10 months and 10 days after construction began, completing the project ahead of schedule. The Japanese utilized this route to transport soldiers and supplies to Malamian for an impending invasion into India. They brought locomotives and carriages from Japan and also employed Thai trains. However, due to the route's rugged terrain, hastily constructed tracks, and steep inclines along cliffs, the trains couldn't operate at optimal speeds. Some sections were so steep that additional locomotives were needed to assist in pulling the train. The journey took 7 days and 7 nights to complete. In June, the rainy season began, bringing flash floods that washed away many bridges and submerged tracks. Train operations had to halt until the rain ceased and the bridges were repaired. Furthermore, the railway faced air attacks from the Allies, forcing trains to travel only at night. During the day, trains had to be concealed in forests or caves, and separate rails were laid specifically for this purpose. The completion of the railway line didn't end its dangers. It remained a deadly route plagued by accidents. On November 1, 1944, just 1 week after the 1-year anniversary of the Thailand-Burma Railway's opening, disaster struck. A train carrying 2,000 Japanese soldiers and 100 cannons, pulled by 2 locomotives and comprising 17 vans, departed from Nong Pla Duck Junction en route to Burma. As the train crossed a long bridge and ascended the mountainside at the Mayo, approximately 200 kilometers from Kanchanaburi, tragedy struck. The bridge collapsed, sending the convoy plummeting into the ravine below. The crash resulted in numerous fatalities among the soldiers, while the cannons suffered significant damage. In an attempt to conceal the incident, the Japanese authorities tried to keep the matter secret. Further tragedies occurred along the railway line. At kilometer 247, another convoy met a disastrous fate as it plunged down a cliff. The accident claimed the lives of 2 drivers, 2 Japanese soldiers overseeing the work, and several laborers. The collapse of the section connecting the rails and a wooden bridge caused the locomotive to tumble, dragging the freight train it was towing into the ravine. Another significant incident involved the derailment of the Railway General Staff Nursing Unit convoy between Hindad and Parangkasi stations. The accident occurred before reaching Thong Pha Phum and resulted in the death of the military medical captain and 8 members of his team, with many more sustaining injuries. Many times, trains derailed or fell into ravines, making people on board scared. The news often reported these accidents, leaving both drivers and passengers frightened. Sometimes, the derailed train cars were left sitting there for a while. To sum up, this railway is 415 kilometers long, with 304 kilometers in Thailand and 111 kilometers in Burma. It took 10 months and 10 days to build, and sadly, many people died during its construction. However, it was only used for a short time because some bridges got washed away by floods and others were attacked by Allied planes. Initially, it was meant to transport about 100,000 Japanese soldiers to invade India, but the mission failed. Later, it was used to bring soldiers back to Thailand. An important person who rode this train was Dr. Bama, Burma's president appointed by Japan. When Japan surrendered on August 15th, Dr. Bama took the Death Railway to escape British forces from Burma to Thailand, continuing on to Japan. Dr. Bama described his feelings during the ride. The bridge was made of wood and bamboo, tied with rope and wire. Some parts used only rope. It stretched along the abyss, and in some places, we sailed on a long bridge protruding from the cliff. My heart nearly stopped. There were sharp curves, steep ramps, and circular turns. Yet, our train didn't slow down. This journey will stay with me forever. After the war, England offered to sell the Thai-Burma railway line within Thai territory to Thailand for £1,250,000. Thailand had no plans to use the railway but couldn't let others buy it either. Reluctantly, Thailand bought it but left it abandoned in the forest, seeing no use for it. In 1947, the Thai-Burma Railway regained its infamous title as the Death Railway when M.L. Kri Dichadiwang, Minister of Transport and a co-founder of the Free Thai movement, sought to improve the route for commercial purposes. Inspired by the expertise of Japanese railway soldiers he observed during his visit to the strategic railroad in Manchukuo, he embarked on a mission to explore the route for potential enhancements. Accompanied by his team, Minister Kri Dichadiwang set out on a special tram train from Nong Pla Duck Junction Station on the morning of February 2nd. Their journey took them to 262 kilometers between Prangkasi and Naith stations, where a bridge over River Kwai presented a grim sight. The railway sleepers, already charred, had given way, causing the tracks to collapse. Tragically, the minister's inspection convoy tumbled into an 8-meter deep ravine, resulting in the immediate death of Mr. Charung Jiranant, a doctor from the railway department, and severe injuries to M.L. Kri and Mr. Pun Sakuntanak, Director General of the Department of Railways, as well as the driver. Despite his injuries, Mil. Kri bravely endured for an hour before succumbing to his wounds. His body was transported to Thonburi Station, arriving at 10 o'clock am. On February 4th, his untimely demise marked a significant loss along this perilous railway route. At the destination station, behind the waterfall, there is a simulator for this railway line that informs visitors about the number of people who shared their fate. This stands as one of the great tragedies in human history.